Hi, this is Steve Platek for Evolution, This View of Life, the magazine that approaches anything and everything from an evolutionary perspective. Today I'm talking with Dr. Keith Erickson, Assistant Professor of Math at Georgia Gwinnett College. Couple notes about Keith. Keith is successfully reproduced. He has genetic representation of the next generation and is an avid CrossFitter. Hey Keith, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. Keith, tell me about your interest in evolution or evolutionary science, generally speaking.
Well, as a math professor, I don't get a lot of opportunities to practice in that area these days, which is unfortunate. I did my graduate work in bioengineering and dabbled in it. My research didn't specifically deal with that too much. I looked primarily at white blood cell migration, both from a experimental point of view and from a math modeling point of view. But I've always been interested in evolution, and in fact, I'd love to get more into it, and primarily probably from a mathematical perspective. Unfortunately, one of the issues here right now is that our math program is just developing, and we don't have all the math classes in place. So eventually we'll have a math modeling, advanced math modeling, where I'll get to do more of that kind of thing. Right now it's just calculus, and there aren't as many opportunities. But they're coming. But I've always, as an undergraduate, when I first started going back, I've always been interested in the outdoors and nature and all that stuff. So it just sort of seemed to follow naturally when I was an undergrad and started taking biology classes and learned about more of the details of evolution that it just sort of jived with me. I kind of got it and was fascinated by it. Was also fascinated by 100 other things, so I didn't go into specifically evolutionary studies, but I dabbled in bioinformatics more in graduate school, and I was really interested in, and actually did a little bit of work in these evolutionary models. You have these probabilistic models that talk about gene sequences and how you can relate, more bioinformatics type stuff, how you build these trees from these gene sequences and things like that. That seems pretty fascinating to me, and there was a lot of work going on in my lab with that. And again, it seemed fascinating, but it was just sort of off to the side of what I was doing. So I didn't get to play with it hands-on too much.
Right. Do you think, can you pinpoint a point in your life where you feel like, oh yeah, it makes sense now? The evolutionary idea makes sense relative to any other explanations of the natural order of the world?
Can I pinpoint? It seems that as I go and as I learn more about it, I get sort of new perspective, and it makes more sense, I guess.
Okay.
But it always seemed to make sense to me anyway. I can't pinpoint a moment.
Okay.
When I was an undergrad, I was taking all these science classes, not just biology, but chemistry and physics, math. And I was getting into all of it, and the biology, certainly, it all made sense. I guess that was the aha moment, because before that I was just minimum wage jobs. I practically failed out of high school. I wasn't too into anything but whatever I was into at the time.
Right.
So it wasn't until I was 23 and went back to college that I started taking these classes. It was like, yeah, it all makes sense. It all fits. Evolution. It didn't seem like there was anything else out there competing with that. Certainly, the religion thing didn't stick with me, even though I went to church every Sunday growing up. It just didn't take. Probably because my parents weren't religious. My mom sent me to church with the neighbor so she could have Sunday mornings off. And, so somebody asked me the other week why I'm an atheist, and my response was, well, actually, probably because my parents were. So that's probably the main reason I'm an atheist. But now that I am, everything makes sense, and certainly the evolutionary aspect fits better than anything else. It just makes sense.
Wonderful. Now, recently on campus, you were part of, and I've been talking about this, you were part of a lecture for GGC Science History Club, which, I have to say is one of the most influential clubs on campus as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
And you talked about belief and the idea of belief-based reality.
right.
When you think about being an atheist, and you think about believing or agreeing with evolutionary principles, what is your take? What is your takeaway message on sort of human belief?
Well, yeah, I'm. So this is one thing that came out of my talk. In my talk, I focused more on that sort of the history of astronomy, because that seemed to be, the scientific revolution was developed around more astronomy than anything else. So that seemed like a fascinating area for me. One thing that I learned in developing this talk, because I'm not an expert in astronomy or the history of math or anything like that, but I learned a lot. And one thing that struck me was that everybody had their beliefs all throughout, and everybody still has their beliefs, even if you're a hardcore evolutionary scientist. You have these biases, and a good scientist will try to sort of program out those biases in an experiment. But some people are better at it than others. But people had their beliefs all throughout. Even the hardcore astronomer, scientist type people, most of them were astrologers, and they worked for royalty. The royalty wanted to know what the stars and the planets were doing, so they could make decisions based on this information. So they believed in this whole astrology business, and the scientists did too. And even some scientists, Newton did a great thing, and he had precursors, but like Galileo was scoffed at by fellow scientists for believing in basically this idea that of gravity, this basically this model of gravity. So it's interesting, and as a mathematician, I deal with a lot of models, and one of the things I tried to convey in this talk was that the model, we do this in math a lot. We create models, and then we sort of start to think of the model as the real thing, but the model is not the real thing. So the model is our best description of the real thing. And even the theory of evolution, as strong as it is a model of the real thing. The real thing is, we have a good understanding, as far as I know, of how messy the real thing is. But it's messy, right? There are a lot of open questions in evolution. Not to say that means that we can discount evolution in any way whatsoever.
Right.
But there are a lot of open questions that we need to explore, and we need to explore it from a scientific perspective, obviously. And evolution is, as somebody said, the best thing out there, and biology doesn't make sense except in light of evolution. So
the greatest quote, right? And Richard Dawkins' quote is, evolution, it's the only game in town. Right? Yeah. I mean, in terms of explaining right now, describing the natural order of the world, it's the only game in town. Right. So let's change gears a little bit. Tell me about, you recently started out doing some stuff with our research crew and stuff like that. And tell me about some of the, I know we don't have any projects going yet, but tell our audience a little bit about what you're thinking about doing in terms of some research and modeling math and how it interacts with biological systems.
Yeah, that's an interesting area. I'm not actually sure where it's going, and it's fun to go anyway, and it's fun to talk about these things and more to learn about what's going on in your realm with your students. And just I don't do a lot of actual science in my position right now, which is unfortunate. I guess a lot of the areas I'm playing in mathematically are so well developed. I'm just trying to learn those systems. Mm-hmm. And again, my research experience is more with biology and doing experiments, which requires a lot of infrastructure. So, but what I'm thinking about now in terms of your group is what I'm really interested in is this in regards to CrossFit and sort of the psychology around that. Just confidence issues and how somebody's confidence can affect not only their performance in doing exercises or things like that, but just even in taking a math test or, talking to people in general, confidence and all the myriad ways that confidence comes out, both verbally and non-verbally, and how that affects how people interact with each other. And I guess it sort of ties into these gender issues you're talking about as well. It seems to me that a lot of people coming out have major confidence issues. I know that. So if you're dealing with that aspect of the gender issues, but and then there's also just the mathematical analysis we've talked about of movement and how that plays into people's proprioception, or if people have better proprioception, how that plays out in all the other things they do. It's still kind of, my ideas about this are really rough, and I haven't had time to read up on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay.
But it's a ball that's moving slowly, and hopefully it'll pick up some speed and start rolling along pretty quickly at some point.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Keith, thanks for taking time to talk to me. What will happen now is your video will be passed on to the magazine and processed, and I'll send you the link once it's up.
All right, sounds good.
All right, just stick around 1 minute.
Okay.